Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's core developer meeting. Um, Thank you, Tim, for running the last one. I was away, and um, thanks for everybody for participating. And I hope everyone had a great DevCon who was able to go. I had a good time overall. I think Japan might be my favorite place to visit so far. Um, let's see. Oh, Istanbul. That's a big item, and that's the first one we're going to talk about. Is there any updates on the Istanbul test nets that have been launched so far? Does anyone have anything significant? It seems pretty quiet overall.
I haven't heard any
Okay.
problems.
Yeah, I haven't seen any issues either. So that means we can probably look for a mainnet block number now. Um, so do we have any ideas on that, or are we going to decide that in Gitter? What are people thinking? And I guess the first thing would be like, what's a rough date we want to do it, and then we can decide a block number around that.
Yeah, let's pick a week and then a block number can be figured out of band.
So my thinking was we want to target like the 4th or 11th of December and not do the 18th, 25th, or 1st of January or the 8th. So I think those are the 4th, 11th, or 8th of January are the real targets that we should be discussing.
Sorry, when was the first date you suggested there?
You're really quiet, Martin.
I believe you said January when you intended to say December in that last. Can you list the three candidate dates
Yeah,
again?
sorry, I said both. December 4th, December 11th, and then January 8th, I think are the ones we probably want to target. I don't think we want to,
Yeah, that gives
yeah,
a month, right? That gives a little over a month for people to get ready.
a
December
month to 6 weeks.
6th is 6 weeks.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm good with December, where was it?
December 4th.
4th.
So we've got a candidate of the week of December 4th.
Yep, and that sounds good to me. Does anyone else have any ideas or comments on that?
I would say if we shoot for December 4th and if that gets shot down, then we potentially push out the 4 weeks to the January mark so that we're not running up against holiday weeks. Just, you know, but that's just my gut speaking there.
By shutdown, do you mean like if there's an issue found with Istanbul?
Just some unforeseen thing that causes us to want to push back just a little bit or something, and then we're coming right up against the holiday line. So I'm just thinking we shoot for the first week of December there, and then if that uh, falls back, then we roll back 4 weeks.
I like that to get a fixed fallback date because that sets the standard. Are we going to stop the shipment? Is it worth shipping it a month? Is it worth slipping it a month? Sets the standard for how critical the issue needs to be. Is if it's bad enough we need to wait a month, then we should slip. I like that.
I like that too. Any other comments on that? Otherwise, we'll figure out the block number in the Gitter chat and just figure that out today. Let's set a goal for figuring it out today.
Yeah,
So that,
I
yeah,
have. I
that'll
just
be.
have a question of what is the good reason not to do it earlier, or like what is the reasoning for not having it be sooner than that?
All the clients need to put the block number into their code and they need to ship the code. And then all the exchanges and node operators need to download that code and install that code. So I think 4 weeks at a minimum is what we should budget for that sort of process of getting it shipped, getting it out there, and getting the end user clients installed.
So you're saying this basically gives, if we do the 4th, we give 2 weeks to clients to actually implement the change and then 4 weeks for everyone to upgrade.
Yeah, I mean, the clients could do it in an hour. It's just getting it through the release process that tends to take the longer time.
My only worry on that, having the backstop date be in January, like pushing Berlin too far back, the next one may get into problems with the Ice Age. So I would rather have it be 4 weeks out with a backstop, like have the next third Wednesday on be in November be the backstop, but that's probably Thanksgiving, so that doesn't work. But having the backstop be the December date so that it isn't pushed into January for the one hiccup that happens. If that makes sense.
Yeah, but if we do that, then we might not be giving enough time for exchanges to upgrade. So
So
yeah,
the
so
six weeks is
just
the
to
good time.
understand.
That makes sense.
Yeah, there's nothing here that says that we can't use second week of December. It's just that if we can set some easy backstops here, and we can always change our mind later if the situation calls for it.
So the thing about the backstop date is it's also the same process if we're going to ship and change the time. We have to build a new client, ship it out, and get everyone to install it. So that's why I think at least 4 weeks for a respin is necessary.
No argument here on that.
Okay, so if you're all good, James, we'll just do the week of what do we end up saying? December 4th.
4th and January 8th as a backstop.
Yep, that's good.
Okay, great. That's decided then. Let's move on to EIP 2124. I gotta Google search that one. That one is, oh, is that the new fork identifier? Yeah, that's the one. I think Peter did that one. Yeah, Peter and Felix. So, is it on the agenda to just? I don't. I wasn't at the last meeting. Is it on the agenda just to continue to discuss, or?
So actually, the reason why it was why I wanted to postpone. So the idea with the fork ID, we published that a long time ago. So probably around, I don't know, March or May. And people in generally said that it's fine and the whole fork ID thing is okay. And to be honest, we didn't really push it a lot harder because it was mostly just a specification of how this fork ID would look like, but it wasn't actually a specification to include it anywhere. But in general, people kind of like the idea. And then the reason why we brought it up again is because we had these issues with Ropsten, where the network, essentially there was a miner pushing the non-forked chain quite a lot. And generally, clients have a hard time following a non-majority chain. So usually you need to tweak the clients, add some whitelisting flags or blacklisting flags to make sure that they are on the correct chain. And all of these issues can be fixed by actually including the fork ID in the protocol handshakes. Essentially, this was the reason why the whole fork ID was created and designed. And then the question really was the reason why we brought this EIP up again is because we have an implementation and a proposal to include it in the handshake of the ETH protocol, essentially just replacing the Genesis hash field with this fork ID field. So it's just a tiny beyond trivial change. However, since it's an ecosystem change, we felt that we owe it to the ecosystem to actually get a thumbs up and not just roll it out in Geth. And so as far as I know, people already liked the idea of fork IDs, so that's nothing new. This talk is just about whether anyone has any opposition to actually start using it or not.
No opposition to using it, but I'm curious about the motivation to replacing Genesis hash with it, and why not just add it as a new field?
Yeah, because the Genesis hash is already hashed into the fork ID.
Right, but it's opaque, which makes it like non-inspectable if it isn't what you have, which means that you can't you lose data there when it isn't a known value. You can't actually tell what the other client is
Yeah, but so even now you can't differentiate, for example, between Ethereum Classic and Ethereum. So that is
Right, but you can differentiate between, oh, that is Ropsten or something like that. I mean, I guess you can in theory do that with fork ID, but if they mix in different block numbers, then you've lost it too. So
well, yeah, but why? Yeah, I guess my question is, does it make so if it is based on the Ropsten Genesis hash, but it forked away into a completely different direction, then it's not really Ropsten anymore. So does it matter that you don't account it as a Ropsten node if you know that it's not Ropsten?
um, I am just starting to think about this, but really the bit is that it you lose that information as like an easy classifier for who you're talking to. That's my only objection, since it's 4 bytes and a one-time message. It seems simple to to keep both, or to keep Genesis hash and include fork ID. At least that would be my default inclination.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not really married to either way. So if anyone else has any opinion, but for example, one thing that we can do is that in ETH60, I don't know, 3, 4, whatever is the next one, we can just add the fork ID then as a new field, and essentially they would run side by side. And then later on, if we decide no point to have the Genesis hash, we can always drop it later. So if that makes people feel better, I'm fine either way.
Yeah, I have a much easier time saying yes to that. I'm willing to be convinced the other way, but in general, thumbs up to iterating the ETH protocol and adding fork ID to the status message.
So just to confirm, Peter, this is, since it's not touching the EVM or anything internal, this can go into Geth by itself. It doesn't necessarily have to, though it would be nice to have it.
Yeah, of course. So so this is just a networking thing. So if Geth rolls out ETH64 with this extension, we will still support the old protocol. So every client will still be able to talk to Geth like nothing happened. So it is fully backward compatible. The reason why it would be nice to have at least a consensus that this is a good idea is because ETH is actually the Ethereum namespace. So we don't want to turn it into a Geth namespace.
All right. Can we also hear from Besu, Parody, and maybe the EWASM team and anyone else for their concerns?
I like it going in. This is Besu. Whether it's with a separate field or Genesis, I am neutral on. But something like this going in, I view as a net positive.
Great. Parody, are you cool with it? Way?
Yeah, I think it's not hard to implement, so I think for party we are fine with it.
Great. And then Thomas, another mind?
I just joined, but I assume it's the discussion on the improvement on the history of forks in the synchronization mechanism, the handshake. So I'm totally in favor of this change. I've been reviewing it and it looks good.
Great. Is there anyone else who has comments? Okay. Let's just say it's good to go then, Peter.
Okay, then I'll make the
Unless anyone else has anything.
Yeah, then I'll make the minor modification that Piper suggested to keep the Genesis hash to, and I'll just open up an EIP. Probably it will be a tiny EIP to spec it so that it's official and there's some written thing.
Yeah, it'd be a networking EIP, which it looks like you and Felix already correctly prescribed to that EIP. Okay. Next up, we have Berlin.
I had a meta question about that. I know
Sure.
I know that these kind of changes don't require hard forks, but is there still value in or should we have them go through the same EIP-centric process, or kind of go through that same funnel if they're going through networking or entity?
Yeah, definitely yes.
Okay.
So it's
And in a way, it kind of did already.
Sorry, I think that question may have been misunderstood. Do you mean like actually having coordination and block numbers? Is that what you're referring to here?
No, I mean the proposal that Martin gave, that there's an initial green light, and then there's work done, and then testing, and then a final approval, and then implementation. If things that
I don't think that makes sense, since this isn't a consensus issue, that this is kind of completely orthogonal from the consensus part. You're referring to kind of like the EAP-centric forking and the signaling mechanisms, right?
Yeah, in general, it's if the same people are, should it go through that same kind of process, or should it have its own process?
Yeah, I would agree with Piper.
Yeah,
Doesn't need to go
because we
through.
have mechanisms in the networking protocol for like negotiating. I'm on version 63, I'm on version 64, I support both, that sort of thing. This isn't a thing where everybody has to agree on it. So it's fine for any client to roll it out today if they wanted to, and it wouldn't affect the network or other peers really. Yeah.
A
Cool.
side question regarding these EIPs, because we do have a networking category, and 2124 is there, and a couple of other node discovery EIPs or ERCs, whatever you want to call them. They are in draft status right now, and I think one of the questions maybe James had, whether we should have EIPs for all of these, and I would have a question whether we should move them to final if they are adopted.
So I would say that yes, we should have EIPs, because EIPs act as these documentation, so that you have essentially it's a spec. So that if you look at, you're wondering what ETH64 is, you can just pull up the spec and then you immediately see what the diff was compared to the previous one. So if not for other, even for documentation, I think it's worthwhile to have a nice spec of the change. As for draft versus final, I think yes, if we agree that we want to roll it out, then when we roll it out, we should probably mark, for example, the fork ID. I think there's some minor corner cases that somebody suggested we can do cleaner, but otherwise it's kind of more or less final in my opinion. However, the discovery ones, I don't know, so that can be played around with. I'm not sure how final that is. Probably Felix is a better person to ask. So there are quite a few EIPs which are kind of independent from one another. So this whole fork ID thing is completely independent of the discovery EIPs.
Okay. I think then, I think we need to fix some of the EIP process so this is more clear. But just to avoid doing process for the sake of process and slowing down any implementation, I think we can say this is final and agreed upon. And then we'll need to work on how to better provide a process for these in the future. And I think that's kind of where you were getting at, James, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and we can move on from that. I'm just trying to suss out what are things that should go through that funnel, and what are things that don't, and what we should do about the EIP process in general, and moving forward on how to improve the whole system.
So just to add a slight diverge from that slightly, I think so one of the reasons why this whole networking changes, and especially Felix's work around discovery, is a bit problematic in the IP process itself, is because it's quite a few steps. For example, there's an EIP on ENRs, there's an EIP on extending discovery v4 with ENRs, there's an EIP for discovery v5, there's an EIP for fork ID, etc., etc. And honestly, these all should be individual EIPs because they are completely independently scoped tiny sub modules or sub protocol things. However, the problem is that most people don't care about networking at all, or a lot of teams don't have the capacity to work on networking, or they don't care, or they don't have whatever. And the thing is that as far as I see it currently, mostly Felix and Frank is the two people who push the networking aspect. But the only way to prove that these things like ENRs and discovery protocols and the new DNS discovery, the only way to prove that they are useful is to actually more or less spec them out, implement them, roll them out, and then start demonstrating that, hey, yes, these work. So we can't really get stuck and block each individual EIP and have big discussions, because most people don't care. Most people want to see that, yes, it actually works. The whole system, the whole dream actually works. And only then will they actually invest the effort, which I think is fine. But this makes it a bit weird in the EIP process.
That's good to know. We should correct the EIP process to take that into account. Any other comments?
Well, as you said, Peter, at the minimum, it would be nice to have a final documentation of each of these networking features or changes. And it seems like the EIP repo may be a good place to have them.
Yep, and I will open a new one for the ETH64 proposal.
Okay. Moving on to Berlin. So this one is going to be a fork that is post-Istanbul. We need to talk about a few different things here. What's listed is the process and scheduling discussions, the Ice Age, and the tentatively accepted EIPs. I think we should talk about tentatively accepted EIPs at the end, and I'm debating whether to talk about the Ice Age or the process and scheduling first, because I think Ice Age is dependent, or one is dependent on the other. I'm trying to figure out which way should they be dependent on the other, and I guess it depends on when the Ice Age is supposed to happen. Does anyone have an estimate for that?
Well, if we go down with the EIP-centric thing, then the Ice Age can be just another EIP-centric thing that gets solved.
Which I would second and advocate to do.
And I would third.
Yeah. So
I
we
have a bit of it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Tim. Oh, no, I didn't have
Okay,
anything important. Go ahead.
I have a bit of a different perspective there. So I agree that like EIP centric process is probably something you want to aim towards. I think that given like historically how slow hard forks have been, going from like year-long hard forks with a bunch of EAPs to months in between hard forks and like one EAP per hard fork might be too much too soon. So I was wondering if there's maybe like a middle ground we can do here, like have an upgrade that's, just commit to upgrading in say 6 months with whatever is actually ready then. So kind of using the EIP process proposed by Martin, but not necessarily going live with each EAP, just agreeing on a date, shipping whatever's ready by that point. And having that be much quicker than our current 1 year cycle, but without going all the way to just having one upgrade per EAP. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think we necessarily want to go with one upgrade per EAP. So I think it's completely fine to say that so even the EIP-centric approach, we could say that, yes, EIP X is ready, but we know that there are 2 more EIPs that are almost ready and can be done in 2 weeks. So it makes sense to bundle them together. So we don't necessarily have to do cowboy style as soon as it's ready, it's live. But we tried to do the half year, or I think it was 8-month hard forks originally. So Istanbul, I think even Constantinople was supposed to be an 8-month thing. And at least our results were that, yeah, can we just add this one and that one and that one? Because people kind of always feel that if they miss the hard fork, then God knows when the next one will be. So yeah, I'm not sure.
So on that last point of like, if people missed a hard fork, I think this is kind of why saying we'll have like a hard fork in 6 months and maybe pre-committing that there will be another one 6 months after that, kind of just provides this visibility to the community that these things are going to happen on a regular schedule. Yeah, so that's just my.
As far as looking backwards on the state of the fork process and how some things have been slower than we had wanted to, my view is the reason is because it hasn't been EIP centric, and that the solution is that the scheduling will be a lot easier when we're working with things that are ready to be shipped.
I think the
I'm
big
also in
change
favor
is.
of the EIP-centric approach.
Sorry, Tomas, go ahead.
I just wanted to confirm that I'm also in favor of the EIP-centric approach. As Peter says, maybe sometimes it'll be easy to bundle them. There is one interesting consequence of this. If there is any EIP that will be particularly dividing, then one EIP per release gives potentially, theoretically, community more of the possibility to reject it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I kind of, I would say that that might be actually a drawback. Because
I see the problems with it as well. I mean, it's sometimes a bit easier to push important changes with the community if they're bundled, but I'm not necessarily sure if this is fair. However, it may lead to situations where people try to suggest that it's a fork opportunity.
I have proposed a hybrid process for this, like considering EIP centric, because EIP is really important for upgrade, and considering the time frame model as well. I have pasted the link here in chat, and would like you guys to have a look around it. I mean, what I'm trying to say here is we can target for a biannual upgrade, but there should not be any fixed month. It would depend upon the readiness of EIPs, and we can consider, say, for example, 3 EIPs that are bringing substantial changes. We can bundle them together, and then we should come to the scheduled part. When EIPs are ready, we should be, the hard fork coordinator may be providing the timeline when we would be getting into client implementation, testnet date, mainnet upgrade, and these things can be time bound, but not the fixing date that in this month we have to get into an upgrade. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, that sounds like that's like a time bound plus EIP bound. Okay.
Yeah, kind of hybrid model of both.
So I think one of the things worth pointing out that's different from what this proposed model is, tests are supposed to come before we include it in a block, because what we did before is we would decide what was in the fork, and then Aleph would have to implement it, and then we'd have the records tests. So now that retest test is out, and we can write our tests in basic Geth or Aleph, we could test before we ship. And I think that was one of the things that held back previous releases, that the tests took longer to write than anticipated.
So, in order of things that are important, I think that would be near the top, is making a upgrade model that puts test first, meaning nothing is even approved until tests are made. Is that something most of us can agree on?
No.
I'd like to so I like the discussion on process, but I also really like trying this sort of fundamentally different approach of EIP-centric forking on this very easy candidate fork, which may only include a change to the ice age, which is very simple and uncontroversial. It's sort of like trying EIP-centric forking with our training wheels on. So I'd like to advocate that we try this this one time. It isn't necessarily what we're committing to for the future. Once we've done it, we can talk about it and see how it went, and continue to discuss all of these potential hybrid approaches, potential problems that might come, things like that. But maybe it's good for us to try doing it this sort of fundamentally different way once, just to see how it goes.
Yeah, and I just want to address that comment you had, Hudson, about test first. So the thing is, why testing drags its feet quite a lot historically is that it's very difficult to do the testing and produce the test cases when there are no clients that have implemented it. So therefore, the implementation needs to come pretty soon and be activatable in the clients, and not just in Aleph or one client. But
Oh yeah, I agree with that. I think I was more meaning we don't, like we've been doing before, we don't say we want to do this EIP and then we go through all of the steps only to at the end of it say, oh, we don't want to do it anymore because we found this during implementation. I guess it's like do final approval after everything's done, I guess is what I was trying to
yeah,
say. It's hard to word. Yeah, okay. So I'm liking Piper's idea, and the reason is we couldn't right now that for the train model, which is the one that Tim and Dano suggested with the two forks a year on a specific date, like the third Wednesday of whatever date we or month we choose. That process, I like that, but I don't think we can try that until after Berlin because of the Ice Age. So we wouldn't be able to say like it wouldn't be two a year. It would be like it would feel like it need to be three that year or something like that. Like it just doesn't feel like we can do that model with Berlin. What do you all think, Tim and Dano? Is that something that's accurate, or how would you fit Berlin into your model?
I think it's accurate. I think London is when we can really do a full cycle on this. Berlin, as you mentioned, already has some fixed things overhanging it.
I think the counter argument to that is, aside from the ice age, which I think on the last call we said was not until next summer, so it's something that's not super urgent. The two EAPs that had sort of the most traction for Berlin were 1962 and ProgPow. ProgPow is obviously pretty controversial, and Martin this morning put a pretty long comment around 1962, so that one also has some stuff to figure out. All this to say, I think there's actually a case to be made that maybe we don't have that many EAPs ready for Berlin anyways, and if that's the case, then maybe just having an open upgrade and having that be 6 months in the future also makes sense. That's not like a very strong opinion.
I would think along the lines of Piper, and part of me worries that we're pre-optimizing for sort of a little bit of the not looking at it, like pre-optimizing for stuff and assuming a lot of things we don't know. Or I would, one thing that'll be different with like moving forward is one, I'm joining the EF to help with hard fork coordination, so we'll have a lot more time and eyes on the process itself, and something I want to push forward. And as far as the EIP centric model goes, for me, it's a focus on getting EIPs ready rather than focus on when are we going to release whatever and then figure out what will fit. So just it's the saying we're going to have 2 forks per year wouldn't be the way that I would say let's have like a schedule and windows that are available that people know in advance so that people can prepare for it, and then work on how many upgrades we're going to get in this year.
I think I followed almost all of that except at the very end. So can you do like a summary of what you said at the very end?
Yeah, the changing the attitude from, oh, how many forks are we going to have this year, to focusing on getting EIPs progressing through the EIP centric model and then scheduling them when they're ready, and having a system of that, like a way of setting the schedule so it's consistent and predictable for people to use, like using the third Wednesday, but having the windows being 6 windows a year that it can ship, rather than, but not saying we're going to fork something then or ship something then, but we can, if there is something ready, this is when they will go through. And if it doesn't make that 2-month window, then it hits the next one, then it doesn't hit the next one, and it still keeps the focus on getting EIPs ready to be forked, rather than saying, hey, let's have this date and this, like focusing on when getting forks are getting out.
Okay. I think that's good. Um, as far as what we're gonna do for Berlin, um, it sounds like things are tending toward more of an EIP centric model for the EIPs that are done, which would be the Ice Age. Like the Ice Age block one is so easy; it would be a really great practice because we can say this has gone through the process of the EIP being written, it being implemented, the test cases going in, which I don't even know if we even do test cases for that, or if we do, it's just like a couple, and then finally saying it's going in, and then scheduling it with any other EIPs that are done around it. If not, we'll just do a single hard fork for the Ice Age.
Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
does anyone volunteer to write an EP for the Ice Age postponement?
Yeah, I can do that.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think last year we didn't do that, and then Offrey did it at the last minute.
I was wondering when to interrupt.
Go ahead.
This might be an unpopular opinion, but I kind of feel like the EIP centric model is actually what we have been trying to do, with one exception. But these steps the EIP centric model explains is pretty much the same what we have in EIP 1. However, somehow we were not successful at enforcing those steps. So in the EIP 1, the initially accepted is just called accepted, which basically means that people are kind of happy with the idea, but then it would be down to the EIP champion or proposer to do all the steps, implementation and test cases, etc. I think we have the very same things in EIP 1, just we never enforced them. And I wonder, how will we enforce this? And I see a couple of problems we have been in the past. Number one is how to get people to review EIPs, first of all, and give their opinion. In Istanbul, one example was the Blake 2. It took quite a bit until some people from clients could actually focus on giving feedback on the EIP, actual low-level feedback. Because most of these low-level EIPs, especially the ones affecting the EVM, it's fine if you give a blessing that, in essence, the EIP looks good, and then ask or let the champions to implement them, create the test cases. But then how many cycles would you accept of reviews and changes to that? And if you don't want this to be a never-ending process, then you need to somehow motivate people, likely from this group, to give those reviews prior to the first blessing state. So I wonder how we will do this.
So, go ahead.
Alex, I have some thoughts on this. I'm not necessarily ready to share in detail, but what I'm interested in us looking into is pursuing the kind of research model that at least my team has going on with ETH2, with having dedicated resources on the client teams that are focused less on client maintenance and development and more on upcoming research and implementation, trying those things out. And in that model, you've got people who are more vested in participating in discussions about EAPs, in generating test cases because they're collaborating with similar other teams who are focusing on these same things. and I think it fixes some of the motivation and attention problems that we've continuously faced for the entirety of the history of the network.
So actually, Piper, my second question ties into what you said. That there have been a couple of EIPs which had been well received, but it turned out that the champions were never really considered to implement those changes themselves or create the test cases. They were only interested in giving the idea, sharing the idea, and then expecting client developers to finish it off. I wonder what will happen with those. We just took up the work in the past. How will this work in the future?
So, to answer both your questions, the first one is how are we going to be motivated? Excuse me. How are we going to be motivated to continue to basically the fact that we were trying to do an EIP centric model sort of before, and I think the difference between Constantinople and Istanbul and what is Istanbul now, and even the ones before Constantinople, which was what was it called? It's bothering me now. What was the fork before Constantinople?
Byzantium.
Metro.
Byzantium. Yep. So the reason is because now we have more resources that are in the hybrid technical non-technical range. So James just got hired to specifically like have their eyes on the process, work with people to improve the process and formalize it, and talk to the client teams and make sure everything's being done properly. We also have people like Pooja and Tim and Trent and other people who've been attending the calls, Brent too, who are behind the scenes helping with stuff more so, and they've come on the scene in the last 6 to 8 months and have been growing in their roles and their unofficial roles, I guess I should say. So that's going to be the primary determining factor for you saying how's it going to be different than what we were trying before. I think we have more people power now, and we have like that's going to make a huge difference, I think. And then for your second question, um, that was how are we going to incentivize people to look at the EIPs more closely? I personally like Alexi's working group model, where you basically, when you have an EIP, you have a champion and they're responsible for everything. And then you also have, actually, let me just put the link in. What the process could be. So, yeah, you have improvement proposals that aren't formal, you have working groups around them, and then those working groups improve, like work with the client teams and on both reviewing and implementation and testing, and those working groups of the people who have vested interest basically recruit and push for things like review and implementation. Oh, I posted in the wrong chat. Here we are. So if you look at the what the process could be, Ethereum 1x, um, it has a bunch of charts on with smiley faces on what the process could be like in the future. And I think we don't need to figure it out today, but be kind of thinking about this model with the other ones we've talked about when considering how we can change things for the future.
I just wanted to drop one last concern.
Sure.
Is that so basically there's no way to scale the work as it is right now because it's mostly client developers who try to do everything. And most of these proposals would mean that we would separate these concerns and try to engage more people in the work itself. And in that model, the client developers likely their role would be to give this initial review and then reviews throughout the process, but they wouldn't be required to implement all of these changes themselves. However, a lot of EIPs are proposed by client developers themselves because they're close to the network and they see issues and they want to fix those issues. So is there a potential that we're going to get into a situation where these client developers going to propose their own EIPs, going to only work on their own EIPs, and everything else gets neglected?
I don't think so, but I'm not sure which model we're talking about. In the concept that I'm sort of working towards right now, it involves a lot more close collaboration between client developers so that we're not all working on our own solutions to the same problems at the same time, so that we collaborate more closely and work on similar things more closely concurrently.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, let's see. Trent said something. Trent, did you want to say something? Oh, you're muted if you're saying anything, Trent. Oh, maybe the mic isn't working, and that's why. Oh, okay. I'll just read the comment. What does the Geth team look like? Are there efforts to onboard more core members to that team? What would help shepherding EIPs? And the same can be asked of Parity and Nethermind and the other clients. Besu, is there any ways that we can expressly try to recruit more people to the core team, or um, would that help shepherd EIPs? What are people's opinions?
Yeah, so speaking from the Geth team's perspective, we've probably been doing a really crappy job at trying to find new people. However, back when we did have a few people join and then leave, generally it's not easy to find somebody who would be enthusiastic about working on low-level protocols. That was our the things that we've learned, that the Geth code base is quite complex. It's quite a lot of optimization, so there's a pretty steep learning curve to just jump in and start making modifications. And it's also really hard to review and approve PRs, for example, specifically because there's quite a lot at risk and it's a bit critical. So it's kind of hard to find people. And as far as I see it, not many people enjoy spending a month trying to get a 25% speed improvement in some weird corner case of the Geth code base. So I would be really happy to get somebody on board, but it's not it has not been easy in the past to do such a thing.
I'll kind of echo what Peter said. So I'm from Besu, Pegasus. We are actively hiring engineers. So if there's anyone with a Java background who's interested in this stuff and the protocol generally, we are hiring. And I think it's finding like the intersection of people who have like the technical experience, desire to do this, and also there's a fair bit of like non-technical work that goes into shepherding each. So there's like the uncertainty around, what if you work on this thing for a year, it actually doesn't make it in. So it is hard to find people. But I think if you reach out to anyone on this call and you're listening and you're interested, we can probably find you somewhere where you can help the community.
And there's probably a client being written in your favorite language, so reach out to that. If Java's not yours, the other people I'm sure will be interested in talking.
Any other comments?
So I one last comment on these processes, and I think what we need to somehow solve is this step one, getting the blessing from, this is from the EIP centric document, but basically the point where we weren't really good at in the past is reviewing EIPs, giving initial feedback. And I'm not sure what's the best solution, but I think it would be nice if there would be like a recurring way, maybe every 2 weeks, 2 core EIPs have to be looked at by people attending all core devs, likely not on the call, but outside of the call. But I just wonder if there's no like scheduled way to look at EIPs, then how will people get any kind of blessing of the EIPs? because in the past this has been it has been that there was no process where people just kept coming back and pushing the IPs that at some point they got some kind of feedback. But I think this is the essence we would need to change to make this better.
Yeah, so the approval going forward needs to be very explicit and needs to have the actual client developer groups present to do that approval.
I want to say that I have a big. Can you
Go ahead,
guys hear
James.
me? I had to start driving, so I'm hoping you guys can still understand me.
It's a little low. If you could speak into the phone louder.
Okay, I'll talk as loud as is reasonable. I experienced this on the other end as part of the Blake 2B proposal, that I was begging people for feedback, and part of what happened is it took like almost 3 months for it to be merged to draft, and no one really cares if something doesn't exist unless and like a lot it was so and something so that's something I really want to think about as part of hard fork coordination is how are we going to bubble up should be looked at more close. Eccentric process gives this gradation of we should look more closely at this, we should look more closely at this, and having some form of schedule or a formal way to do that open to, and would love more ideas and to talk with you about it, Alex.
Dana, did you have something?
I was just going to say that I thought if the first one was to get the high level rather than the low level details, the general approval was to say that all core devs were like, yeah, this is a good idea. Go ahead and get the final specification and implementation. And then at that point, when there's a client implementing it, we can have the details. I wasn't expecting that the first step would be full approval of the full API and all that. So, if someone came up with a proposal, let's change the EVM bytecode, replace it with JVM bytecode, the all core devs can say that's a bad idea, don't even try. Versus if it's something smaller, like I think we should support this specific change to this series of opcodes, they say it sounds like a good idea, implement it, try it, figure it out. Then you come back and say this is specifically what it looks like, and here's a test cases. That was my understanding. It may not have been what everyone else's understanding of what the process would have been.
Mine would be similar, but I think this also depends on the change, because some changes might be small enough, contained enough that we can on like if there's only an abstract or maybe a really short specification, it would be enough to give a blessing. But some others may be so complex that it may look like okay, they make the implementation and it turns out it has to be changed entirely, and then we may end up in a couple of cycles, giving feedback and the champion changing everything. I'm not sure if we can get this right in the first run anyway. But I think it depends on the scope of the actual EIP. Some will be easier to deal with, and others maybe just too big to give proper feedback.
Okay. So, in summary, this is all good things for us to think about, and I have hope for the future of this process improving. Next up, we have testing updates. Dimitri and Martin, or anyone else who is doing testing related things with their clients, any updates?
Not from my side.
On a related note, for the Istanbul, the 220000 is still not merged yet. So I think it's just someone needs to hit the merge button and get the EIP merged, because I think I have already addressed most of the reviews and testing comments. So just a reminder.
Yeah, I think also 1884, I made a PR to make it final a couple of weeks ago. It's still not.
Oh, this is EIPs, right? Not the code?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Can you all ping me and I can make sure to make those final as long as there's nothing from the Nix software preventing it from going final? That'd be great. Or actually, me or I guess Alex can do it. Okay. And any other testing updates? Or are we good, Dimitri?
Yeah. There was official test release, and part of those tests were created by the Go client. And the Go client currently passing the blockchain test, the state test, and every other client should download that update and run through that test before the hard fork. Also, all tests were moved to the legacy test folder. Those tests you need to check if it's affected by any of the implementation of the new hard fork, because like you could break something with the implementation of a new changes in a previous fork. So legacy tests are just that for the previous hard fork rules to check that they are not affected. And yes, I would like to see more tests, not just the basic coverage of the EIP. So now every client developer, they're welcome to write more test cases with retest ETH and Go client and Bezo client, fully compatible with retest ETH now. You could write the state test transition tests.
By the way, I do have one update. So there's a new Hive that's been deployed. It has changed the URL, and I posted it to the All Core Dev GitHub channel if you wanted to check it out. But it's running around the clock, always pulling the latest tests from the test repository and the latest, so far, I think, Geth and Parity clients. That's it.
Okay. Just to go over decisions from last meeting, the ISAG AP will not be included in Istanbul. Oh, stupid phone. Will not be included in Istanbul. Seems like there's no major reason to do it now. Should give us enough time to plan for another fork and not delay Istanbul, according to James's calculations. And the other one was bring your objections to the all core devs in 2 weeks if anyone is opposing the Geth team defining ETH64 as the fork ID thing and rolling it out. From EIP 2124, we already talked about that. Cat herders are going to reach out to the Gorley team to make sure that there are clear communication about node upgrades for Istanbul is one action item, and the other one is that David Palm will talk to Wei to see if 2200 should be self-contained. Wei, did you talk to David Palm by chance?
Yeah, but I mean, last time we discussed this on the Ocore Dev channel already. I believe the issue is wild already, because 200 is self-contained at this moment.
Great. Okay. Any client updates that any clients that want to give an update about anything important of theirs or anything like that? That's the last thing. Okay, great. I think we're ending about half an hour early, unless there's any other updates.
Yeah, this is Brent. Just a quick notes taking. We're taking notes this time, but as far as identifying people here, I'm seeing Karaleb. I apologize for not knowing people, but sometimes when you use aliases and people, I think are referring to you as Peter. Is Karaleb and Peter?
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Usually every time I join the meeting, I rename myself, but apparently today I forgot. Apologies.
Okay, so how would you like to be listed in the attendees, as Peter?
Peter, yeah, Peter.
And what's your last name, might I ask?
I'll write it down, okay?
Oh, okay, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, it's a complicated name to write.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, appreciate that. And also just to comment on formalizing the process of getting EIPs approved. One of the things you mentioned is some EIPs need lots of review and other EIPs don't need lots of review, and we need to track how many people have reviewed it, and when people review that, if they find a problem, how do you formalize that tracking? Anyway, just a mention for Canonizer. That's exactly what Canonizer is designed for. For example, you could create a topic for any EIP, and you can have the description of what that topic is and a pointer to the spec of the EIP. And then you can have people, once they reviewed it, they can basically sign that petition or join that camp. And you could have a whitelist of people that are approved to review an EIP, and then you could use a canonizer algorithm that would only count their vote. And so you can see, okay, now we've got 6 approved people that can approve things, that have approved this, have reviewed and approved this. And also, if someone sees a problem with an EIP, there is currently no formalized way for someone to communicate that other than to just go to all the forums and start yelling and stuff like that.
Yeah, having a centralized place for that would be a good idea, but I think as far as Canonizer goes, I think, oh yeah, I talked to you at DevCon about
Right.
Canonizer a little bit, and I think that what you should do is have a test, what's it called, like a test vote or whatever it's called in the Canonizer platform, and put that in the Ethereum Magicians form,
okay.
and specifically on the page for that Tim created or Dano created, I forgot which one, for the upgrade process, the process for the train station EIP centric model. That's in Ethereum Magicians, and it is on the first comment on the agenda. There's a link to it, and it's under train station.
Yeah. So where is that again? On
number 3 on Tim Byko's comment.
Oh, okay.
In the agenda.
Yep. His comment in the Zoom chat.
Nope, in the agenda on the PM repo.
Agenda for the yeah. Sorry, I'm not familiar with that. So the agenda for the
PM repo. And you know what? I'll reach out to you and send it to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And sorry if I'm taking up too much time.
Yeah. I just posted the link in the chat here, Brent.
Oh, great. Got it. Thanks so much.
Yep. All right, cool. I think we're all good. Anything else?
So maybe, I'm not sure we want to discuss this now, but maybe make a call for the next call. There were a bunch of EAPs that we already moved to tentatively accepted for Berlin, and I think there was like some controversy around pretty much all of them. So I know that this summer when we moved a whole bunch of them, Peter, you had a whole lot of comments. Then Marlon, this morning you had a comment about 1962, and then there's obviously ProgPal, which is another one which people have thoughts on. I think we should at least try to figure out how we're going to get through all those discussions. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to have a meeting in a week, and I think that'll be the perfect time to talk about that.
Okay.
A week from now. And because yeah, we can just kind of, that'll be the main topic of next week's meeting, because we'll have the fork number by then, and that way we'll get back on track with the meeting times. The reason we had a meeting this week was so that we would stay at the same cadence as being 1 week off from the ETH 2.0 implementers meetings without having to have a weird skip week.
Yeah,
so
that
yeah,
makes sense. I think we just want to share this with the community, that like if like, or at least reach out to the champions of those EAPs and tell them that like this is when it's going to be discussed.
Yeah, can someone do that? That'd be really amazing if someone could jump in and just let some of the champions know. I don't know how many are accepted, so it might be too big of a task.
I think there's only 5 or 6, and they're not accepted. They're tentatively accepted. Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk about it on the Gitter channel. If not, I can probably do it a little bit.
So would we prioritize EIPs with champions over EIPs that have no champions?
Good idea.
Cool.
Oh, James, are you going to say something? You're unmuted now.
Oh yeah, I was just saying I can do that, and if no one responds, then that obviously will say something about the state of the EIP.
Okay. Sounds great.
And to be clear, the call is next Friday. It's not 2 weeks from now.
Yes, it is next Friday.
Quick question. Maybe I missed it. Since we kind of picked when we would like mainnet the mainnet Istanbul hard fork to occur, is anyone willing to do the block numbers?
We were going to discuss that on Gitter once we like kind of start doing some calculations. Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Hudson.